Hey, Pax. Thanks for coming to our panel, How to Puzzle in Your Game. I am Mike Selinker from Lone Shark Games. You may know my stuff from like the Maze of Games and Pathfinder and Betrayal at House on the Hill and stuff like that. But enough about me. I want to introduce you to three people who make my three favorite puzzle game things out there, but from totally different backgrounds. It's going to be a crazy panel, all sorts of strange stuff. And we got a million questions from our audience. Thank you in advance. We'll try to get to all of them. We'll do our best. But first, let me introduce you to some cool people. Let me start with Elisa Teague. So Elisa is a puzzle designer and game designer. She made the game Geek Out. I don't know why I'm talking. Why don't you tell us some things about things that you?
Hi everyone. I'm Elisa Teague. I'm a puzzle designer and a game designer, and I made the game Geek Out. No, I've worked on a bunch of games, some with Mike, including Apocrypha Adventure card game and Betrayal at House on the Hill, Widow's Walk. I do a lot of board games and card games, and I'm also an RPG author and a puzzle designer, and I like combining all of those things in at once. That's me.
And recently, you've been doing the Adventurers League thing, right? Which is all the puzzle stuff that D&D players want, right?
Yes, well, Adventurers League is basically when you go to a convention or you go to your local game store and you want to play Dungeons and Dragons, you can pick up with your Adventurers League character in any game that's played, and that's called the Adventurers League, and there are a series of modules that you can play. I've written quite a few of those, and my specialty in those is combining puzzles into your D&D adventure. And so I've been tapped by that group to write those specifically, especially the competitive epics that have appeared at GaryCon a few times and the opening epic at GameholeCon last year, and they're all very puzzle-oriented.
Nobody ever says, Mike, we need you to write an epic. I want to write epics now.
And again, I'm level, Mike.
Yeah, I'm going to turn down all projects that aren't epics from now on. Okay, so this also we have Joshua Boggs. If you are we've seen a huge explosion of puzzle video games recently, and one of my favorites is a series called Framed. Josh, can you sort of explain what that is to people?
Yeah, sure. So Framed is a noir puzzle game. We rearrange panels of a comic book to change the outcome of what happens in the story. So you might have like a screen that has like 6 panels on it that shows your main character running from the top left to the bottom right, maybe trying to get to an exit, and there's obstacles in the way. And your main mechanic that you have to help this character is just to rearrange these pieces of like these panels, and in doing so, it changes the order in which they run through it and helps them overcome whatever obstacle there is to move on to the next level.
Yep, it's great. There's two Framed games now. Anything else you want to tell people about what Studio Mayday does?
Yeah, so after the 2 Framed games, we took a little break, and during that time I've set up sort of a solo adventure with Mayday, working on an unannounced project that I can't say what it is yet, but that's going to be exciting as well.
All right.
But, maybe there will be Framed stuff in the future. Who knows? We'll see.
That'd be very cool. Yeah. If you haven't checked it out, you got to go do it. So just to complete like this circuit, so now we talked about like my stuff with board games and Lisa's with RPGs and Josh's with video games. Another whole side of puzzle games is the vast explosion of escape rooms and online escape rooms and things like that. And I mean, I know everybody who makes those things, and there ain't anybody better than the fine folks at Locurio here in Seattle. And so I've asked Summer Herrick to join us. Summer, you want to talk about what Locurio does?
We make escape rooms. We like to consider ourselves sort of an immersive adventure company. So the intention is to create other sorts of live action puzzle games that aren't necessarily escape rooms, but escape rooms are the hot thing right now, so that's where our focus is. In my particular background, I come from the theater, film, and television world, so I have acting and writing experience, and that's sort of why we started off focusing on narrative-driven escape rooms. So.
Cool. And one thing that's true about all of our puzzle stuff is that every one of us could probably write any number of sort of ordinary puzzles, but we all focused on story-driven puzzle experiences. Like every one of us was like, no, it's not just about feeling smart and being you have to be into something. You have to be immersed in something. And so this crew is one of the best, I think, if what we're talking about is immersive puzzles, which is a site, it's not like it's just all limited to the New York Times puzzle, crossword puzzle anymore. We've sort of pushed all the envelopes, and I'm excited to see what all of you do in the future because you're all geniuses. So with that, I want to ask a couple questions. I'm going to try to be the host here, although I will interject whenever I think a question is kind of aimed at me. But I'm not going to just speak up when you hear a question that you want to answer because we got a whole bunch of them. But let me just start by asking what I think is the sort of softballish question, which is, why do you guys put puzzles in your games? Like, why do that? Games are fine by themselves. Why are we doing this thing?
So I love puzzles. I discovered the puzzling community, which is like a community of people that host puzzle hunts and do various events back in the early 2010s. And the other two people that I originally started Locurio with were also part of that world. So it was a complete natural that, of course, our escape rooms have puzzles anyway, but of course our escape rooms are going to really focus on having good, high quality puzzles.
How about you guys?
I think Summer sums it up also for me. Like, I love puzzles. And honestly, really it's your fault, Mike, that I do it. But I think I also come from a background of solving puzzles. When I was very little, my dad used to give me different puzzle books to do when we were on long plane flights or long rides in the car or just at home, and I would crack codes, and I really just loved puzzles so much. And I think when I met you, Mike, that was stoked a little bit more, and we started putting puzzles and things and working on puzzles together. And now I love puzzles so much that, yes, a game can be great on its own, but I want it to be even greater, and I feel like puzzles enhance critical thinking skills and really enhance the experience so much, because there's nothing better than when you're doing something and then you have this brilliant idea and it just makes the whole thing epic.
No, you're going to do that every question, aren't you?
Josh? I agree. I think it's two things, especially in video games, unless it's solely just a puzzle game, puzzles are often really good ways to stop all the action happening at once. They let you breathe and they let you soak in the world and all that sort of stuff, depending on what game it is, right? But outside of that, agreeing with what Elisa and Summer said, is that I feel like puzzles it's like you're kind of exploring your own mind a little bit, even though someone else has made it. It's like you're just playing it yourself, and it feels lower pressure, but enjoyable at the same time. Those are the things that I really enjoy.
I think that's kind of it for me too. It's like I've sort of gotten myself into this position where the player, the solver, the group, the entire internet is kind of up against me in sort of a weird kind of battle of wits kind of thing. And the thing I love best is to lose. Right? Just to see the smile on everybody's face when they feel like they've beaten me. Right? I mean, that, there's no fun whatsoever if they don't, right? I mean, I know people, I once saw an escape room, Summer, maybe you can address this, that was so proud that only 5% of the people got through.
That drives
They're
me
so
nuts.
happy. They're so happy by that. What is that even? Why would you do that?
I don't know. That always drives me nuts when people are like, we have a 2% escape rate. No, that's bad. the joy in a puzzle is solving the puzzle, like having that hero moment of having the aha and making the connection. Why would you ever want people to not have that? That blows my mind. And, you know, some in escape rooms, I'll say, I think a lot of people use the excuse of they think then people will come back and play the game again, pay money and come back and play the game again. It never happens.
Never once has happened.
No.
I don't think, anyway. I mean, I think it's true that there is some element in that in video games, right? That there's some element of, if I, like in Framed, for sure. I mean, there are very few levels I solved on my first try through.
Yeah.
But there was a limit. Like, I mean, even that, right, where I knew I could restart at any time, and there's no chance of loss in your game, right? Like, you just go back to the place you were just at, right? Even that I would get to 4 or 5 times. I'd be like, no, that's it, man. Find me some spoiler on the internet.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because for Framed, like most puzzles, right, you're trying to show the player the objective, right? Like in my opinion, and I guess it depends really on what the focus of the puzzle is, but a good puzzle shows you the objective, and your job is to work out how you're going to achieve it, you know, because otherwise you don't even know what you're doing. And so, yeah, like the first run through, we'd always make you fail immediately, because we're trying to show you, like, this is the rules of this puzzle. This is like what you're trying to get to. And so, like, the failure is like part of the intended experience. And then it's like, okay, now play it. Like, now, like, fix this situation. But yeah, no, I totally agree. Like, I think there were a couple balancing issues here and there, but yeah.
No, I mean, and to be clear, it didn't happen that often, right? But it was just, there's my tolerance for failure is very much a bell curve, right? Like, I'll go up that hill a little bit, but I fall fast.
Yeah.
And I know there are people who can't think that way, that they have to keep fighting against it until it's done, until it's broken. It doesn't matter how long that takes. And so, you know, one of the things that, like, we have to deal with is we don't always know our audience. In fact, in most cases, we're not there. And so, like, how do you deal with that? Like, how do you deal with the fact that people have different solving skills, different pain tolerances, different willingness to pay attention, different, like, how do you deal?
So me personally, I think, like, for video games, it's just playtesting. Like, you just have to keep playtesting. I'd be super curious to hear, like, how you do it in an escape room, because you have, like, time limits, and, like, you can only have people in there for a certain amount of time. Like, that sounds fascinating to me. How do you solve that?
Yeah, well, we also play test a lot first, but while, you know, we do have the benefit of actually being present, or my staff being present with the players while they're playing the game, so we get to see firsthand when they're struggling, when they're encountering moments when they're kind of going off down the rabbit hole of a wrong path. And so we use sort of like dynamic hinting. Our game masters observe the game very carefully the entire time, and we choose. We don't have the players ask for help. We are very cognizant of sort of the time frame of the room and where they should be at certain points. And more importantly, we're good at recognizing when people are starting to get frustrated. And so we can choose when to send them little nuggets of help to try to steer them in the right direction.
Well, Lisa, your stuff always comes with hints, right?
In role-playing games, we have the same types of dynamic hinting involved that you would have in escape rooms as well. And instead of the host being in the room, you have the GM at the table that is taking that role. So the GM can look around the table at the players and see those cues that they might need help. And in the modules that I write, I actually have a DM tips column for the puzzles that tells the GMs how to give those clues, what to look out for, and then also how to address each character, not necessarily the player, but what the characters can do to be able to get hints. And I do that through skill checks so that we have a nice balance between what the player knows and the player's puzzling ability and what the character would know and what the character would be able to do in a puzzle.
How do you folks sort of deal with the concept of establishing your like base difficulty level?
I think for me, I mean, again, it really is playtesting, but it's also I establish how long do I think I want them to be spending. How much time do I want them to spend on this particular puzzle? And then I see how long it takes for, the average person of all ages, of all backgrounds to be able to do it. And then I tailor it for that. I also, you need to be really cognizant of the fact that like you as a writer obviously know the answer and how to do your puzzle. And sometimes it's really difficult in playtesting to just take a step back and let people work it out. It's different when you're seeing people do the actual solve once the puzzle is already written and you're waiting for the aha moment. But sometimes you get the feeling that you want to, encourage people to solve, and you don't really want to give those hints too much until people ask for them. And I think in playtesting, that's really important, is see where they need the hints so that you can address it in the cluing and the original opening of the puzzle and other clues that they would have around, so that you know that all information is available to the person, that they may need to solve it, but then you would know where to go for additional cluing if they needed a little bit more help. That's how I do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I tend to work out where it is in the like spectrum of the number of puzzles. So we might know that we need 12 puzzles or something for a section. So I need to know. So you have a general curve and then like a payoff on that's just kind of more easier, but makes you feel good, right? And I just kind of always like they're always kind of relative to each other. Like the earlier ones are always just usually about one thing, and then the next one you're introducing the next concept, and then you start combining them. And it's just through playtesting, and Elisa was saying, like finding that aha moment and seeing how long it takes them. And usually, like, issue that I've noticed in my experience has always just been like badly communicating to the player. Like whenever it's like actual frustration, it's like we aren't doing our job properly to communicate something, rather than like them being stuck. Because if they know what they're trying to do and if they feel like they're really close, they'll just keep going like, oh, just one more. Like, how do I get this? And then like watching that and playtesting and seeing them get it, it's like the best thing when you put something on. It's like, yeah.
Hey, Summer, how do you deal with the situation where you've got a group of people and there's two or three people or one or two people who are really good at puzzles or really central to leading the group or stuff like that, and then there's some people who just don't get, either they don't have the confidence or they're not as quick on their feet or something like that? How do you deal with that?
So we try to come at it right from the beginning, right from the design, and design a variety of puzzles that call out to a variety of skill sets. So excuse me, there may be a puzzle in the room that's about physical dexterity, and there may be another puzzle that involves a little bit of math. There may be a puzzle that's wordplay. But when you have a great variety like that, it's particularly important in something like an escape room where it is a team event generally. You need to make sure that you're calling out to every player in the group at one point or another so that everyone has a chance to have their hero moment. So the more variety you can incorporate, the better it helps with that. And I would say also having story baked into everything, helping the immersion of it. Even people who feel like they're not really good at puzzles, they still are feeling like they're living in that world and they're having that experience with everyone else. And that makes a lot of difference in how involved they feel.
Where do you find the line between kind of breaking that immersion and being like, okay, this is a puzzle, you need a hint? Or do you try to make sure that it's all framed within the little zeitgeist or like the diegesis of that little puzzle world? Like, what is your, like, because I mean, escape rooms in D&D, and it's like, I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, definitely. So we actually try to bake our hinting into the story as well, so that when you get a hint, it doesn't necessarily feel like, oh, I'm getting a hint right now, I'm getting help. It's like I'll try to do this quickly. In our first escape room, the Vanishing Act, you are searching a magician's dressing room while he's on stage with his assistant. The assistant is the one that called you in to help. The last thing she does before she lets the group into the room is she gives them a pre-programmed cell phone and says, I'm going to do my best during my breaks in the show to send you any helpful information I can possibly think of. Conveniently, those little bits of information she thinks of tend to help you out with whatever you're working on at the moment. But people tend to get excited to see them come into the phone. They've made sort of a personal connection to, this is a person who I have already met. This is a character who is sending me information, and therefore it doesn't take them out of the game as much. It sort of lets them stay in that immersed state. And we also try to give hinting as lightly as possible, with as light a touch, so that it feels more like a random thought that then spurred you, the player, to make the connection yourself, as opposed to look behind the curtain.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Right, and as far as when you're playing a role-playing game, you can do that the same way. The game master can see what the situation, wherever the puzzle is thrown in the adventure. All of the hinting can be thematic, and the way that I like to do my hinting is that if a player, for example, doesn't really know how to do puzzles, or even if they do and they're really just staying in character, and their character, let's say, has an intelligence score of like 8, which would be pretty low, and wouldn't normally know how to solve a puzzle. They may be a fighter, and they may walk into a puzzle room that's all about weapons. Well, they still know about weapons. That is their background. They're a fighter. So they can roll skill check knowing about weapons. Or if they're a bard and it's a musical puzzle, they would get advantage on asking questions about history of instruments and things like that. There are lots of ways that you can incorporate the hints into what the story is while you're telling it. And I think that's really important because not all characters are going to be, high intelligent, high wisdom characters, and they need to be able to use all of their skills as well. Even if it is just basic strength checks too, and this kind of plays into how I feel about escape rooms also. The best puzzles for people that don't really love puzzles are the ones that are teamwork puzzles, where you need to be repeating information from across a room or behind some glass, or you need to like move things together and like carry something and place it in the right way, and it's all teamwork. Well, when you're playing a role-playing game like Dungeons and Dragons or any of the others, that strength-based character is the one that's going to have to push the pillar right onto the exact square where it needs to go, and everybody gets to be part of that team.
Jason Morningstar is a role-playing game author, and he asked the question earlier today. I think we're kind of dancing around it. It feels right on, that we try to make failure as fun as success, right? Because we're going to spend most of our time in a failure state, right? We're going to spend most of our time with the puzzle unsolved, and so in that period of time, we don't want people to feel awful. Right? We want them to be enjoying themselves. And so a lot of the things we do with story, with hinting, with teamwork involvement, things like that, are designed to make the period of time between when you get the information and when you solve it as enjoyable as possible, because otherwise you would maybe focus on the fact that you're not done and the fact that you haven't succeeded. And we don't want you to ever go down that spiral. Right. That's
very true. And that's why I give players a lot of things to do while they're solving. Most of my, not all of them, but most of my puzzles when it comes to role-playing games either have a combat option where if the players hit a wall and they just can't solve it within a certain amount of time, the puzzle room turns into combat. Either the statues come alive and start attacking, or something like that happens. And a lot of times it happens, there's combat that's happening while there's puzzle solving. So the people that aren't as into solving the puzzle will be fighting, and while it's not their initiative, other people are still trying to solve the puzzle. And so that way everybody can participate and not have that awful feeling. But as you said, sometimes failure is the most fun. And just like when you roll that 1 when you're in combat and you're like, oh, I critical failure and I stabbed myself in the foot or whatever, you can make a funny story and a funny outcome out of anything and bring enjoyment. And sometimes not being able to solve something will be able to affect the story later. So yes, maybe they didn't get the clue at this point and they have to move on. The good thing about role-playing games is you can always take whatever was supposed to happen in one encounter and kind of place it into another, and maybe they'll run into somebody else who did find the clue, and that will be a new encounter for them to experience later. There are lots of little tricks that you can use if you see that the group is not having a great time. End the puzzle when you can, and don't have them be frustrated. You want them to get just to that moment where they have that aha moment and they have that relief, but you don't want a bunch of people like with their arms folded around a table looking bored and just like throwing their hands up in the air. And it's really up to a good game master to be able to tell where that is, just like in any other role-playing situation.
When you design these things, do you often start with there being a character that you have to inhabit that has a sort of puzzle sensibility that might be unique or different than your own? Like, do you start from like is one thing that you design feel different when you're designing it, one puzzle, than a different incarnation of what you're doing?
Me specifically?
All of you. I mean, like, because you all have such a wide-ranging group of puzzles that you create, right? I mean, the Vanishing Act is really different than the Storykeeper, right? So, how do you get to the point where you're writing the right puzzles?
So we always try to start from a story perspective. We try to start with a narrative that we want to tell, and then we base the puzzles within that narrative. In an ideal world, the puzzles are so steeped inside the story that they actually move the narrative forward. They actually provide a way for you to move through the story. Barring that beautiful meshing of worlds, a step back from that would be at the least the puzzles should feel natural in that environment. So when we created the Vanishing Act, one of the first things we did after we had the storyline in place was to just sit down and come up with a list of all the items that you might expect to find in a magician's dressing room. Mm-hmm. And then we went off from there and we said, okay, you'll find linking rings. Who has a base of an idea for a linking ring puzzle? And someone will go off and work on that. And that way they all kind of, they all add to the story instead of, escape rooms will drive me nuts when you go in to a medieval castle and there's a laser grid to climb through.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. I mean, we are in this world where sometimes we're designing puzzles for people who are in a world where puzzles shouldn't be a challenge, right? Like we're like the spy in your game, Joshua, does not think, well, I was trained for this because I know how to jump from panel to panel. They think I have this gun and I would use it to get through my opponents, right? Or I have, and so the character has to be sort of built for the environment that we're making.
I feel like it was interesting in Frame because we had these characters, and they're like intentionally pretty blank slate like, so that it's a little bit different to like RPGs and stuff that Elisa makes. But we did design them sort of around like scenarios, like trying to get from point A to point B, or like within the widest spectrum of it. And really, we just used the case as like a literal MacGuffin. Like I know that is literally the thing that people always call, but like, because in that way, that's always just the objective people are trying to aim for, and then we can keep coming up with skills or scenarios that the character just needs in that environment, to continue. So like our game is very much less about character and more about like what would be an interesting action-y way to solve this puzzle.
Right. I guess what I was sort of getting at there was like the challenge of basically getting from one side of the screen to the other, which is the fundamental nature of the game, is not crafted like it's not arcade's Murder World, right? It's a real world environment. It just happens to be solved by using this, right? It's not like we're adding, sometimes we make characters. Obviously, the Maze of Games has a character in it that is designed to inject puzzles into the environment. But for the most part, we're trying to describe a scenario that isn't really puzzle based, right? What we're trying to describe is a scenario that's life based. And so I think each of us has tackled that in very different ways, but we're always coming back to that thing of, it's got to mean more than just solving a puzzle. It's got to be you're doing something that's really important to you or to the character that you are inhabiting or to the person that you're serving in the case. Usually in an escape room, you're trying to either get out or accomplish somebody else's goal, right? And especially in your escape room, Summer, the person who you're helping is the most important player on your team in some sense, right?
Yeah, for sure. They are the ones who set up the goal for you, the ultimate goal. They're the ones that you're trying to help. And we try to hire people who are comfortable with acting and interacting with the players, because it's really important to know how to make a connection, just like it's a little bit of immersive theater. It's really important to establish that connection early on so that the players remember that character and sort of keep that in mind. And they often sort of feel like even when that character is no longer with them in the room for whatever reason, they feel a connection and want to accomplish the goal.
I'm curious how many of you deal with kids being in your environment and how that changes what you're making. I mean, Joshua, you must have an incredibly wide range of participants. I'm curious whether or not you're designing for that.
So it's interesting. We didn't ever intentionally intend to, but we found once we started going to shows and getting people to play it, kids, like more and more kids were getting into it. And I think because of the way that we like slowly introduced like one concept at a time and there's no words, kids gravitated to it pretty heavily, which kind of like in hindsight, I look back and I'm like, probably shouldn't have had like smoking and stuff in there. But
they would never have known about cigarettes except for you.
Yeah, exactly. But there's age ratings for that. But still, it's little things like that. I think there's like there's something universal about logic, I think, and approaching puzzles that doesn't really have an age barrier. And that's just depending on how much information they need to hold in their head, which kind of dictates how, like, that age barrier. In my view, I'm curious how others.
I think that kids will surprise you every time. In fact, kids are a lot better at these skills than many adults. I think it also depends on what is the target market for the product that you are presenting, right? So if you're doing an escape room about, a murder or something like that, you're probably not going to have that rated for very young kids. Some older kids might come through. And just like, for me with, and I have done escape room stuff as well, but focusing on the role-playing game stuff, I'm really looking at kids, 7, 8 and up that really start playing role-playing games, usually climbing more towards like 11, 12, 13. And so all of those kids can play, can do puzzles. My kids who are now 16 and 19 were my play testers for puzzles over the last, 10 plus years. And they are great at it, actually. In fact, my son solves puzzles at such breakneck speed that I feel like they need to be more difficult until I put them in front of some adults. So I think that are more open to fresh ideas and trying things. Adults, especially people that aren't, that don't feel like they are a puzzle person, tend to be a little bit more reserved and they're scared to try. And so I think the kids do just fine with puzzles, honestly.
So yeah, I agree. With our escape rooms, obviously we have a little bit of a unique challenge in that we have a physical space with handmade props and pieces of art that for obvious reasons it would be a little difficult to have like very young children in that space. We don't have the rooms aren't baby proofed, so sure. we do have an age restriction of 12 and up. We also want to avoid the people who want to just bring their group of 8-year-olds and drop them off for us to babysit for an hour. But even though we have the age limit is not about the puzzles so much as it is about the themes of the room. Like as Elisa mentioned, one of our rooms has some very dark overtones that are uncomfortable for young children. The other one, and neither room is meant to be a horror experience. Neither room is meant to be scary. That being said, people will find ways to scare themselves. And there are a couple of moments in both games that we just don't want to scar children for the rest of their lives. So that's the main reason behind the age restriction. But I completely agree that kids often have just the greatest ideas. They're not scared to try things. And it's so great to see a family group come in with a young child who not only has the ideas, but that the family listens and is able to kind of encourage them. And that's a really beautiful thing. So
how much of this is about like creating surprise? Like, I mean, we kind of like, there are very procedural puzzles that are not surprising, Sudoku and stuff like that. They're not designed to like throw you for a loop. How much of your job is making sure you come up with something that just throws people out of their chair and makes them think, oh wait, I didn't see that coming?
All of it?
All of it. Yeah. I was gonna say, I wonder whether like most puzzle designers have this like weird obsession to like surprise some, like it's like almost magicians, right? But can't do magic. I don't know. I love it. Like to me, that like seeing them get the aha moment is like that. When I see that, I'm like, that's why I love doing it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to find a balance between familiarity and that surprise. So if somebody's going to come across a puzzle in something, you don't want them to say, oh, you don't want them to look like, oh, you find a scroll on a desk and you unroll the scroll and it's a Sudoku puzzle, right? Like nobody wants that at all.
Nobody wants that?
No, nobody wants that. But that doesn't mean you can't come across like an altar and, there's a grid and there are mystical symbols on there and they need to figure out what to do with these symbols. And then suddenly it dawns on one person, wait a second, this is a Sudoku puzzle, just not numbers. You know what I mean? Like these might be just symbols, but this is how I incorporate that. Or, I did one puzzle for the Gen Con Puzzle Hunt with you guys a few years ago. And it was essentially, the mechanic was Battleship, right? But didn't look like Battleship. Nobody would ever walk by the puzzle board and look at it and say, oh, that's a Battleship puzzle. Because it was about, I don't even remember what it was about, apples or something like that. But the thing is that you want people to then, when they have that moment, they're like, oh, wait a second, I understand how to do this now. Because it's familiar to me, but you don't want it to throw them completely out of the story. So having that little bit of surprise aha moment on just how to do the puzzle can be one step up in what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, surprise is a huge element in escape rooms. I think that any escape room that is of high caliber has a lot of moments of surprise, whether that's the aha of a puzzle or a secret door opening up that you weren't expecting. All those moments can create these little pieces of delight that really can be the difference between making an escape room stand out or just sort of be one amongst many. In escape rooms also, because we're in a physical space, we get to take advantage of that and have surprises sort of baked into the environment. One of my favorite things is to have to play with the concept of hidden in plain sight, something that was there all along that is a surprise to you when it's revealed, and escape rooms sort of allow you to do that. So,
yeah, one of the things this panel is about, or at least the questions that I got for this panel, and by the way, we've done a great job of anticipating the questions that are on my list and answering them before I ask them, which I'm very happy with, by the way. But when there's sort of a thread running through them is a very much a reaching out of how do you get better at doing this, right? Like how do you if somebody's watching this and they're like, man, I really would like to write a video game about puzzle series or include puzzles in my live content or in my RPG or things like that. Like, what do you do? Like, how do you get better? Like, how do you make the right choices?
Play more.
Yep.
It's just like writing. Like, the more books you read, the better a writer you'll become. The more games you play, the more experiences you have, the better you'll become, because the more you can see it from a player perspective, the more you can tailor things to make it enjoyable for other people.
You'll also get a much bigger toolkit.
Yes.
Now, that's one way to say you'll have a lot of people you can steal from.
Be inspired by.
Exactly. But I mean, I use the word toolkit to mean, like, I don't actually ever take something directly from somebody, but I often hit moments where I'm like, I don't know what to do here. And then I remember something that I saw that was kind of vaguely like this, and then I can go off on a tangent and make something that's better than what I had thought of and what was there before, right? So there's a lot of sense of just layering different options. I think also a really important thing is to watch people solving your puzzles.
Yes.
Right? To make sure, whatever method that is, sometimes it's like, you don't want to be in the room because you freak people out when you're hovering over them. Or you might have this terrible idea to actually help them. Don't do that. That's terrible, right? But if you get a sense of just sort of watching the ebb and flow of how they're feeling, ignore what they're doing, ignore what they're actually doing. Just watch them with the sound off, right? You'll know when people aren't having a good time, right? Mm-hmm. Stop before you get there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I find in my experience, and I guess this is always something that's interesting. Every puzzle designer has their own experiences they draw on, right? So they're able to pull that in. I got my start in games as a programmer. So and every now and then I still do some programming. And I find the skills I learned or had to hone in doing that aid me all the time in puzzles, because I'm always having to think logically, and something doesn't work right. And you're like, I need to work out why this isn't working. And it's almost, I guess, trying to find, being a doctor and trying to find a problem. And all these sorts of things, like doctors trying to find problems, programmers trying to do, solve problems, detectives trying to solve cases, they all flex that same muscle of there's this problem I'm trying to solve, and I don't understand what's going on. I need to start probing these areas. And I think so to circle back, I tend to lean a lot on very abstract levels of what the puzzle's actually doing. So in Framed, you probably have 2 or 3 states that are happening. Whenever you exit a panel, you're kind of setting a state within the puzzle, and then you're entering another one. And each panel is expecting every other state. And so programming aided me a lot in that. And yeah, I guess it's just like just drawing. You know, people say write what you know, like puzzle the way you know. Like you just have to keep playing. You just have to keep trying. You have to keep failing to work out what works for you.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what like toolkits do you use for planning stuff out? So in my case, my co-designer Gabby and I made a concept called the serial killer wall, which is we literally take Post-it notes and we put them up on the wall and we take string between them, right? And we have virtual versions of this too, and we do it on whiteboards and stuff like that. But really, what we do is make incredibly complicated flowcharts. Like, what do you do? What does your wall look like, or what does your desk look like when you're doing this stuff?
I usually do something fairly similar. In fact, behind this thing on my wall are a series of Post-it notes. So this is a dual purpose background.
Did you just put that up to just make sure you weren't showing us the answer?
No, but when I originally put it up, it was for that. It was to hide from someone I was on a call with. But yeah, so very similar.
I do something similar, except it's not Post-it notes. I have one of these for my board game designs and one of these for my puzzle designs, and I employ the bullet journal method. So I have bullet journals, and what that is it's the new thing in regular journaling and keeping a schedule and whatever, but I've just adapted it. I have a table of contents in the front of both of my journals, and the table of contents is added to whenever I enter in anything on a page. And everything is color-coded or number-coded or symbol-coded. And so if I have an idea for a puzzle, and I say, okay, I want this puzzle to take place on a farm. And so I will write in my table of contents farm puzzle, and then I will flip to a new page and write farm puzzle, and I'll write all my concepts out and color code them. And then when I have different concepts, like, okay, maybe this one's using, some sort of cipher, this one's using Pigpen, or this one's using whatever. And Pigpen is one that I just, recently wrote for a project for a farm puzzle, because that totally fits. But then I will, in the table of contents, every single time something is color coded under farm puzzle, I put that symbol next to it. And so it's almost like a serial killer board, except it's all in a book that I can take around with me. And whenever I have an idea, I write it in there. And I do that for my game designs too. If it's a mechanics idea, I have a page called mechanics, and I list them all in color code there, put symbols next to them, and then you just turn to that same page by following the table of contents, and you know where to find all of the information. Because my brain is like a million tabs open. It's like my computer. So I have to do it that way. Like, I'm always thinking of something while I'm doing something else. So it's easy to just write it down, and then I can go back to it later.
Josh?
I wish I was that organized. Teach me your ways. Yeah, it's usually just like kind of like the serial killer board. Honestly, most of it is I have like folders and folders of Dropbox, like notepad docs, like just it's just everywhere, and it's just like dated, and every now and then I'll go back to it and go, oh, that was really good. But it's pretty unorganized, and it's definitely something that I need to improve on as a puzzle designer, because it like sometimes you don't want to lose the idea, so you write it down, and then you don't revisit it. You're like, and it's like, that was, and you ship the game, and you're like, oh, that was really good. I forgot to do that.
Mm-hmm. We're getting toward the end. We got about 10 minutes left, I think. 5 to 10 minutes left. I want to make sure that in this conversation we haven't thought of other things that we need to cover. Anything that we brought up that we think we should go back over or visit. Anybody have anything?
I mean, we could talk all day about this, I think.
No, I know. Definitely. And there's lots of questions we haven't answered. I just want to make sure. All right. So what have you, so all of us have had the advantage in the last, in our lives of making content that stimulates people's brains and stuff like that. Have you been, and it's great to sort of feel that, have you been surprised how when other people have come back to you and said, you've changed how I think? Like, have you gotten to the point where people have gained new skills and things like that from what you're creating? Have they told you that?
Yes, it always takes me, like, I'm taken aback every single time because I guess I don't see myself that way. But no, I am approached a lot because of either games that I've designed or puzzles that I've made where people have said, oh, wow, this, changed my mind. I do think that my work with D&D is changing how people feel about puzzles in their role-playing games, because I think for a very long time, people have been really against it because they feel like the game stops when everybody has to start working on a puzzle. And I think that my approach has changed a lot of minds, and I hope it continues to. And it's always nice to hear those compliments. And I have found that with other people's work too. Every time I go into an escape room, which is a lot, not lately, obviously, but before all of this stuff happened, I've made it a point to try and go to escape rooms wherever I travel, in different cities and different countries even. And whether I have a good experience or a bad experience, I learn from it. And I know I'm like, oh, I want to do something that's like this, or that involves more tech like this or whatever, or I will never do something with this type of, puzzle or tech or whatever because of the problems. And I'm always learning too. So I hope people are learning from me as much as I'm learning from them.
I've been told I'm not allowed to use lasers anymore. I've my team has basically said you will not get any more lasers out of us.
I never use a black light in a convention setting anymore. So
yeah, exactly.
That was terrible.
Summer, you when you started this out, I don't mean to embarrass you, but your escape rooms are known across the country as some of the best in the world, right? Did you have that kind of expectation when you were doing it?
Yes. No. Yeah. No.
What did you know when you were starting this out, right? Like, what did you?
Well, when we first started out, we first started talking about it in 2014. And at that point in time, escape rooms were very new, particularly in the US. And most of them at that time were very sort of basic. A lot of them were, 4 white walls and a Sudoku taped on the wall. And, there weren't a lot of escape rooms with a storyline. There weren't a lot of escape rooms with a cool set. And so we knew coming into it that we could make something greater than where the industry started. But other people were doing that too. So it wasn't just us having the idea of, hey, what if we had a story to go along with this? Wouldn't that make it better? So I think we always had the goal of pushing the industry forward and doing things that were new and novel and exciting, because those are the things that I enjoy as a player as well. I've played well over 600 escape rooms around the world. So I am an enthusiastic player, perhaps even more than I'm an owner. So I think it's so important to think of the things that you want to see happen, to think of the new aspects you would like to see as a player, and then try to push those boundaries in what you create. And if you're always doing that and you're always trying to sort of broaden the horizons and make a deeper experience, then I think, people will recognize that on some level. So, mostly I just want to make things that are really cool and that people really dig. So,
Joshua, I think your first game anyway, came out at a time when people were just sort of exploring the space of mobile puzzle games.
Right.
Because of what you did, it's different now, right? There definitely is. There are now plenty of games that are attempting to do essentially what you guys pioneered. And so, do you feel like the bar has been raised for you by what other people have created?
Yeah, I guess that's interesting. I don't. Yeah, we do get a lot of developers and stuff come up and say things like, we want to do something like Framed. Is that okay? And we're like, we don't own the idea.
You don't own the idea. You don't own the idea of cartoons?
You don't own the idea. Like, go for it. Like, these sort of spatial logic puzzles are not new. I guess, yeah, it's interesting. Like, as people do more stuff, we do look, like, I personally look at it and I'm like, okay, like, we need, they're doing stuff that we did better, so we need to make sure that we're at minimum keeping up with everyone else, right? Like, you don't want to fall behind. And it was definitely something that happened with like the second game, like the second Frame. We were very aware of like that kind of second album syndrome sort of thing, right?
Sure.
And it was like it was very hard to develop that game because a lot of the ideas were either so out of scope that was just like, this isn't going to work, or had been done before, or other people were doing similar things, and base points. Yeah, we basically are always trying to like make sure we don't fall behind.
Cool. Well, we're getting to the end here. I want to. So for the people who are like, yes, but seriously, how do you do this? Which it's not something you can really do in a panel. I'm just going to self-promote for a second. We have a book called Puzzlecraft, How to Make Every Kind of Puzzle, that is available from the Lone Shark store. It's both in paperback and in digital form. And so if you're looking for like how to actually create specific kinds of puzzles or styles of puzzles, we have that for you. And so if that's a thing you want, please check it out. I want to give you guys a chance to tell people how to contact you or how to find what it is you do. So let's start with Elisa.
Okay, hi everyone. Again, I'm Elisa Teague. My website is elisateague.com, and you can find me on Twitter at geekypinup. You can search my name and see what products I've put out there. I do have a tool that is coming out pretty soon. I can't talk about it quite yet, but if you follow me in the next few weeks, you will know all about it, and it will help you put puzzles in your RPGs. And I think that you'll really enjoy it if you've been watching this panel. And I think I covered all the basics. Yes.
How about you, Summer?
Yes, I am Summer Herrick. I am the owner of Locurio in Seattle, Washington. We do have real-life escape rooms. They are not currently open due to all of the circumstances, but eventually they will be. Please come visit Seattle. Our website is locurio.com. Locurio is Locurio. And if you have, I'm just going to go ahead and put myself out there. I'll probably regret this. My work email is summer@locurio.com.
Lisa's like, why? You're going to get, told you, we got tons of questions for this thing. They're all coming to you now.
Oh, God. Keep them toned down, maybe only one at a time. Hopefully I won't regret that. But I am always very interested in helping other designers, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So,
Joshua?
Similarly, you could, if you want to chat about puzzles or whatever, you could either jump on my website, which is literally just like links to my other things, just joshuaboggs.com. Or you can jump on Twitter. I'm at jboggsy on there as well. Cool. And yeah, just fire any questions. I love talking about puzzles.
Well, I'm Mike Selinker. You can find us at lonesharkgames.com. I'm Mike Selinker in every social media thing you might have out there. And I want to thank the three of you. This has been really a fascinating discussion. I don't think we've ever put together a group this multidisciplinarian about this subject before, and so I think this will probably stay up for quite some time because people will probably want to watch it over and over again. So thank you all. Thank you, PAX, for watching, and we'll see you guys soon.